Welcome to the LOC Roundtable. I'm your host, Clint Culberson, and this is going to be a new format of a show that we're going to do for the channel. There's so much going on in the world, and I have so many amazing friends out there, and there's so many people who are really tapped into the know, who have amazing perspectives, and we kind of want to do this show to not so much concentrate on the guests themselves, but really concentrate on the subject matter and the events that are taking place in the world today. And so for our very first version of this, we bring back two of our good friends, Brad-Olsen and Ryan Gable. Brad is an author, lecturer, publisher, and a radio host of the Esoteric Circle, and Ryan Gable is also an author, lecturer, and radio show host of The Secret Teachings, and of course, they're friends. So, guys, welcome. Thank you for showing up.
Pleasure to be here, Clint. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Clint.
And I am joined by he's the Batman to, and I'm the Robin, and I'm the Batman to his Robin, and whatever it is. My man, Richie Bones Jones.
What's up, LOC community? It's been a while, so it's been nice to get back up on the horse again, so to speak. So, pleasure to be here.
It seems that these events are coming to some sort of crescendo. Like there's a major intensification to the different storylines that are all kind of sort of happening at once. And one of these, and you brought up Donald Trump, but on December 21st, Donald Trump declared a state of emergency by releasing his executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. And I'm just going to read real quick. I'll try to do this quick, but this is from Donald Trump's executive order directly. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the prevalence and severity of human rights abuse and corruption that have their source in whole or in substantial part outside the United States, such as those committed or directed by the persons listed in the annex to this order, have reached such scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political and economic systems. Human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning societies, have devastating impacts on individuals, weaken democratic institutions, degrade the rule of law, perpetuate violent conflicts, facilitate the activities of dangerous persons, and undermine economic markets. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse or engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial systems of the United States from the abuse by the same persons. He says, I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and the economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. Ryan, you've been following the geopolitical scene for a very long time, and what do you think really is happening? And is this all related to the sealed indictments that we're going to hopefully find out about? Does this relate to what's happening in Guantanamo Bay? I mean, what are you making of this? And is this like a major escalation in this fight? Or is this some sort of, people still think that Trump is bought by the elite. So is this some sort of distraction?
I think distraction is a good word. It helps us to dismiss our own responsibility in life in general, whether that's food or family or whatever it is that we do and we like to do, we need to do. I think most of these things are a distraction. Even if it is real, I don't buy sealed indictments. I don't buy the stories of pedophiles being brought to justice. I'm actually doing a show. I've done a couple of shows on this subject. I'm doing a show, and I've come up with this little slogan called "Perversity is Policy." And I think that perversity is policy, period, across the board. And in order to operate within most forms of government and government agencies, to operate at the highest levels of government and most corporations, you have to subject yourself or be subjected to the policy of perversity. And I'm using that as a broad term, but you do not succeed by their terms. You do not have power by their terms unless you acquiesce to the way that things are. And the few people that are able to slip through the cracks, and there are a few, they are not necessarily physically assassinated. They are socially assassinated, which is a much more well, you have plausible deniability, of course, because you don't have to really do anything except sling dirt. But it's a much more easy way to dismiss somebody's credibility by socially assassinating them. So I don't think that anybody truly that operates within that system, my personal view, I don't think that anybody that operates within that system can really truly make a difference. And let me give you one example of why I think that. In my own life growing up, I had really bad skin irritation and dry skin conditions most of my whole life. I had really bad heart problems when I was a kid, something called SVT, supraventricular tachycardia. They wanted to do heart surgery on me. I was overweight. I had all kinds of problems. I was taken to dermatologists. I was taken to doctors, and every person told me the same thing. You got to do drugs, got to do a surgery. None of that ever transpired, never had a surgery, but the drugs never worked. The creams never worked when I had real bad dry skin, psoriasis, things like that. And then one day I started when I got on my own. I went to college, technical college school, never went to a big college because it was too expensive. I got on my own and I started to eat differently. And I started to, well, I stopped watching so much TV and putting myself into a little bubble. I expanded just mentally. I expanded my awareness. I started reading books, all of those things, especially the food, and watching what I would, wash my clothes with, let's say, for example, or what I would bathe in. Almost all of the problems that I had that doctors and experts and professionals couldn't fix, I fixed by taking responsibility. And when I took responsibility, all the problems that other people couldn't seem to figure out, they went away. And I've seen so many other people close to me in my life who have done the same thing, and problems that they've had for a lifetime just seem to, if they don't go away entirely, they subside almost to nothing. So my point is, when you take responsibility, you can rely on other people for information. You can listen to shows like this, shows like Brad's, read Brad's books. You can read my books, listen to my show, The Secret Teachings. You can get information from people, but I'm not telling you to live your life in a certain way. I'm just trying to suggest that there are other ways to live your life, and you don't have to buy into this system. And going back to the subject of the people in positions of power in government and in corporations, I think existing in that system and trying to work in that system that is so perverse and so corrupt only will allow for that system to grow even stronger. It doesn't matter if you try to do it peacefully. It doesn't matter if you try to do it violently. No matter how you participate and how you work within that system, it's going to perpetuate the system even more. So you have to disconnect and remove yourself entirely from that system. Take responsibility for yourself and for your family, and help others see that there's another way to live your life and another way to help other people. That's my personal view.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you. I just wonder if the events that are taking place within the system, like you said, are not just the death rolls of the system itself. Almost killing itself. Like the egotism of Trump. Taking down the egotism of another faction of just a dark system. I mean, I always think that the world is run by a bunch of mafias.
I think that that's part of it. These are multiple factions that are warring with each other, no doubt. It's not one grand conspiracy, I don't believe. You have multiple factions that war with each other, but at the same time they war with each other, they're also kind of friends with each other. So it's like WWE or something.
So why pay attention at all?
Because if you don't pay attention, it's very, very easy to slip back into the belief system, I think, of feeling as if some part of the system is there to help you. I'll give you two quick examples. When I was more involved in politics, I actually worked on some political campaigns about 5-6 years ago. I was looking at this group called Americans for Prosperity. And they wanted to do things like get rid of regulations, and they wanted to make sure that people had enough money to live. And it just sounded like a really great thing. And then I found out that this group was run by the Koch-brothers. And the only reason they wanted to get rid of regulations was because they wanted to basically, run their companies and pollute, and they didn't really care about anything or anybody but themselves and, their business and money. So things like that look like it's a good thing, they can sort of pull you back into the system. And anything that seems like it's there to benefit you and there to help you. I mean, every single election, it almost seems like you've got a huge part of the population. I don't want to say 50%, but you've got almost 50% and 50% against each other. And one side thinks their candidate is going to do something good, and the other side thinks their candidate is going to do something good. And then when we get someone in office, the one side that didn't win, they cry and they whine about it now more than ever. And they look at that one side and thinks that that person in power is doing something really terrible. And the people that like that person in power think that person's doing something really well or really good. And they never seem to question their own power. They rely on experts, they rely on professionals, they rely on authority figures, as we have since birth, to make the decisions for them. I personally don't think that anything within the system is going to ever change for the better and actually change. There is always a perceptual change. That's the red and the blue tie. That's the slight movement towards seeming like things are, like Obama promised, we're going to have more transparency than ever. He was the least transparent president of all the presidents from what I've seen. So anyway, my point is take responsibility. I don't think anything in the system is going to change working within the system.
And Brad, is this just an illusion of perception that we're experiencing with this executive order, or is there something really going on here? Are there guys who are just less evil than the other evil guys, and they're trying to take them out? I mean, what's happening?
Well, I guess I'm going to diverge a little from Ryan's perspective, because I am getting some intel and following a few sources that there are these sealed indictments, and this thing could all very well be coming to a head. So when he does, Trump puts out this edict that we're going to crack down on child trafficking, human trafficking, child sex slaves, all that, by taking the property away. And by the way, we're going through another wave. I mentioned Eric Schmidt at Google. We're going through another wave of all these CEOs who are just mysteriously resigning right around now. And a lot of them have these hideaway homes in New Zealand or faraway places, South America, Canada, Nova Scotia, whatnot, maybe even underground. But I don't think there's going to be anywhere they can hide when this thing all comes down. And like I said, we're getting very close to this all coming to a head. And that's why maybe the weather manipulators are ramping up the game, just to give themselves whatever cover, or to just strike back and say, look, we still have control of this high technology, and you try to round us up and arrest us and send us down to Gitmo. Well, we're going to fight. We're going to go down swinging. And that's what it appears is happening. But, the one thing about Trump is he's self-financed. So he is not beholden to the big money. And in that regard, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully he is who he says he is. Now, do I agree with everything he does? Hell no. But he's certainly not the mold that, look, if it was Hillary president right now, it would be business as usual. And nothing about the pedogate, or nothing about these executives taking off. Nothing about her emails would ever be brought up again. But there's still the possibility that this thing could get blown wide open. And if it does, it could take down. We've already seen a whole bunch of high-profile celebrities and Weinsteins go down. We could see some pretty high-profile congressmen and senators who may not check back into work next week. And that should be a telltale sign. The other telltale sign is a lot of the former deep state politicians, such as Obama and the Clintons and the Podestas, usually tweet around Christmas or New Year's. A lot of them have gone completely silent for about 2.5 weeks now. Mm-hmm. And that's somewhat alarming in a good way, that perhaps they're also making a run for it or have been rounded up. That's what I'd like to hope has happened.
Yeah, all we can do is speculate, right? I mean, we're all us four right here, and the rest of the public really are trying to piece together breadcrumbs, literally breadcrumbs. I mean, I think what we see is probably only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I would assume all of you guys would probably agree with that. And although I will say, there is an increased awareness of this basically this pedophilia problem that's going on. I was just in the In-N-Out Burger here in Arizona, and they have human trafficking awareness stickers all over the place, and on all the employees are wearing buttons and things like that. And so it's like it's coming into our our collective consciousness now more and more. I mean, even the people and Ryan and Brad, you both have been talking about this very unpopular topic of pedophilia at high levels, okay, and you both of you guys have been beating that drum for a very long time, and unfortunately to not many people who want to listen to it. But now it's coming out, and I mean, do you guys feel, Ryan, do you feel with the work that you've done that on some level it is great to see this starting to pop out more and more as a topic, even in the mainstream world?
Yes, it's a positive thing. People are becoming more aware. And of course, myself, I've been covering it for a very long time, and I've been removed from some radio networks because of my coverage of that specific subject. The only thing that's a problem is what I mentioned earlier about UFOs. And I think the word that would be appropriate to use is exploitation. So Brad mentions Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein goes down for saying that he'll give a woman a movie role if she watches him masturbate on a plant, something like that, right? And some other things,
Fucking weirdo.
But nevertheless, what happens with Harvey Weinstein and a couple other guys is that they're being brought down, and it's almost as if the entire planet, anybody who is male, has been grouped into that category. Mm-hmm. To me, what's been done with Harvey Weinstein is exploitation of one piece of trash to push an agenda that has nothing to do with the exploitation of women, the exploitation of men. It's the exploitation of all of humanity. And I've said this a couple of months now, while the men and women argue about what's abusive and what's sexual harassment when women do exactly the same thing to men, and yet that's never talked about. There's teachers having sex with little kids, women having sex with little kids in school every single week. Literally, I'm reading a story about that every week, and yet View, they never touch on that subject. It's all a matter of perception. It goes both ways. And while men and women are arguing over, it happened to me too, hashtag me too, what about the children that are being abused? I noticed that when the stuff about children and child trafficking and pedophilia became, I mean, I'm paying attention to this very, very intently every day. And the more and more that came out to the mainstream, all of a sudden we started seeing the stuff about sexual harassment. And now that has taken the majority of the mainstream media attention. And so while men and women fight about me too, me too, me too, children are being exploited to a degree, and those stories are being pushed to the side and dismissed. So even though people that work in Hollywood are scumbags, that's not what I'm saying that they're not. It's being exploited and used to cover something else up. So I think we always have to be aware that even though something seems really positive, and it might be a genuine thing for us to want to expose the corruption of men and women who work in those industries and do that type of thing, there are things that at the very least, if you're going to compare them, are equal in nature, and they also need to be addressed. Yeah. And I'll give you one example of that. There's a guy, I think his name is John. I'd have to look it up again, but you just type in Disney executive, Disney music executive, pedophilia. The guy at Disney, one of the top executives for producing music for the Disney Corporation, which is one of the biggest corporations in the world, top 6 for media control. One of the top executives has been convicted of child pornography and child abuse. And yet that story is not being talked about on The View, on hardly any media outlet. Harvey Weinstein still gains all of that attention and maintains all of that attention. You would think, at the very least, the story about one of the big executives in Disney being brought down for something that is arguably far more heinous than masturbating on a plant, that would get some type of attention, and yet it's not getting any attention. And that story has pretty much fallen to the wayside. I have to print these articles out when they come out from the mainstream news because they'll disappear the next day, or they'll end up in some archive and the headlines change and they reword things so it sounds more benign. Anyway, that's my point. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, but we have to be careful that it's not the exploitation of a good thing to cover up something that's far worse.
Brad, how disappointed will you be if there are no big names in the sealed indictments?
How disappointed will I be? Well, I don't know if I'll be disappointed at all. I mean, it's still pretty much up in the air if this is happening.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that number rise close to 10,000, though. So to answer your question, I can't see if there are really indictments that are sealed. There has to be big names in there. There has to be a George Soros in there. We know what kind of tomfoolery this guy's been up to in this country, as well as some of the big money manipulators or some of the politicians. We're seeing the Hollywood folks go down now, but I think Ryan's right. It could be this kind of exploitation of taking these guys down. They're sort of mid-level, maybe even low-level compared to who could really be on the top of the chopping block. And I would expect it to go all the way to the top, maybe even include some ex-presidents.
Well, we can cross our fingers. I mean, we're all praying for it. I mean, it would be. I mean, I'm right there with Ryan in terms of just having no faith in a change being made within the system. I am there with you on that. But God, if something does happen where there is a big shift, I mean, look, even marijuana becoming legalized in California this, a couple of days ago. And of course, we sit here and celebrate.
Never thought we'd see the day.
Yeah, and of course we celebrate something that's so ridiculous. Of course it shouldn't be illegal. I mean, really, we're going to celebrate something that you guys have, it's like, oh God, look how free we are. I mean, give me a break, right? But nonetheless, if we can somehow get a shift at the top, I mean, or in the middle or somewhere, just any sort of shift, even if it is one less gangster, a less evil gangster taking out a more evil gangster. And if at the end of the day, that gangster just gives me the space to live the life that I want to create, as Ryan is saying, I mean, really at the end of the day, everyone should just be focusing on their lives, creating the world they want to see. I mean, we can bitch about the world that's existed and maybe does exist now, but we got to get busy, doing our thing, right? I mean, and Ryan, you spoke really well to that. And I ultimately, I believe that should be the number one priority, right? But if I think that I wouldn't be surprised if something tells me that maybe, just maybe, we might get some sort of shift at the top here, and maybe this is it, And we're seeing a lot of politicians with boots on their feet. The John McCain is the most famous of them, but there's a lot of them. Many judges and Congress people and other Congress people.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
I've seen those photographs of the boots on the feet. My personal opinion on that is that if these people really were being tracked by some type of ankle bracelet, an ankle bracelet in the 21st century seems highly antiquated when we're giving children bracelets at school with microchips in them and we're injecting microchips into the body. I feel as if these were really monitoring tracking devices, that there would be a much simpler and much more what's the word I'm looking for? There would just be a simpler way,
I get what
a more
you mean.
convenient way.
Well,
to
and
conceal
only
it.
time will tell. Only time will tell. And hopefully, Brad, I know you're rooting there with me, and Richie, I know you and I have been talking a lot about it, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get together again. I hope, because I really want to do these LOC roundtables to kind of discuss this. There's just too much information coming in now. And, you guys are doing your regular radio shows, the Esoteric Circle for Brad Olsen and the Secret Teachings for Ryan. And I hope you guys check them out, because these guys are pumping out content on a regular basis here at Lords of Consciousness. We are going to be upping our game in 2008. We've already, been seeing some great success with some of the videos we've been doing. Our last video with Robert David Steele, ex-CIA, did really, really well. Over 44,000 views, which is fantastic, and people are starting to see what we're up to, and I'm really looking forward to the future. And either way, whether the government helps us or not, we're all going to be blazing our path, man. I know all four of us are going to be doing that. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you, Richie.
Thanks, guys. It was great to see you all again.
Peace.